Welcome everybody. We are already having about 50 people here in the conference. Welcome everybody. Let me just share my screen and start with our coffee break. Welcome everybody again. My name is Arne, CEO of IoT Academy. Welcome to the Blockchain IoT Coffee Break today on Wednesday, 26th of May. We have a little bit of an agenda. I'm introducing us a little bit for 5 minutes. Then Falco Schütt, member of the board, will also speak to you. Then we have Tanya, Suarez, founder and CEO of IoT Tribe, speaking for 10 minutes. Then we have Holger Köther from IOTA Foundation, Director Partnerships and Projects there, will also speak for 10 minutes. And then we will have Markus Breuer, actually the COO of Ubirch. Stephan Noller couldn't speak today, but Markus Breuer is very good to represent him as well. Then we have for another 10 minutes, then we have at 20 to 3, 2 and 40 minutes open question and answers here, a little bit of a panel discussion, and we'll be closing at 3. Right, without further ado, let me introduce also myself a little bit. So IoT+Network is a member-driven business network from Berlin with a focus on IoT. And we are one of the IoT+Network members. We are the IoT Academy. We are a practical training institute focused on IoT. And we there focus on middle management because that's the most of the times the source of all the resistance that you see in companies. The top management normally are totally sold on digitalization, but it's the middle management where the most resistance comes, and we are there focusing on interactive learning journeys around industrial IoT. We offer 1 to 3 days master classes as well as 10 to 12 weeks learning sprints here to help them understand and accelerate in IoT adoption in companies. So we are part of the IoT One group from Shanghai. We have offices in a lot of different places all over the world. Regional headquarters are in Berlin, Munich, as well as in Shanghai, but that's enough of a little bit of an advertisement here for my own personal, for my own company. How could I get this away? Okay, here. So I would like to, before we can start this DLT blockchain event today, I would like to speak a little bit of an aspect, like part of the magic that blockchain brings to the industrial Internet of Things and to companies using it. If you look back for the last, let's say, 20 years, most of the time, the companies are focusing on securing their data through their channels. So you all are familiar with the topic of VPN, so virtual private networks. But the real magic and the paradigm shift is that data is now encrypted, and that's the focus of the security. And that is only possible with DLT or with blockchain. And another part that's also a very important aspect and also kind of a big, huge paradigm shift that is happening is when you look in the last 30 years, we were very familiar with the copy and paste stuff. Yeah, we were able to multiply digital data at 0 cost. And you could also call that digital abundance, right? And there you would see trust goes through middlemen. For example, platforms like Amazon, Apple, Google, Facebook, and so on, familiar, and in discussion right now. These platforms were those who were able to transfer trust. On the other side, and that's the big paradigm change that's coming right now, is digital scarcity. So this is data, for the first time in 2009, this data became unique and therefore valuable with blockchain. So trust is transferred through DLTs, and this is effectively cutting out the middlemen. And this is like the magic of it. And who is not familiar with this chart might let me also say some things about that. So the first 2 generations for the first 12 years, they were concentrating on blocks. You know that the blocks where the information is stored and the chains that put them together. But this is a very energy consuming process. It's not scalable, and transactions also cost money. So there's a new generation out there, and we have one representative today from Holger from IOTA that focus on DLT, where they use a totally different concept of consensus here, which is brings in many advantages. Low energy consumption, it's very scalable, and also free of cost for transactions. So these little aspects I wanted to put in front of our little coffee break. And let me also give you some recommendations for today, if I may. So, so please use this hour to also network with the participants you're seeing here. So on LinkedIn or on Xing, wherever you want, try to find those people here on the agenda and network with them, and try to get as much as you can out of this coffee break today. Also, please give us some questions. Please write the questions into the chat here on Zoom. And also, I would like to give you, personally, I would like to give you a homework. Think of a DLT use case in your company and write it actually down. Share it then with your colleagues in your company, or with participants that you just got to learn to know here, or with the speakers of this event, and start your own learning journey. And this is all of the introductory words that I would like to make, and I will overgive to Falco Schütt, member of the board of directors of IoT+Network.
Wow, thanks, Arne. What an introduction. Thanks for the overview as well. I'm Falco. I'm the chairman of the board of IoT+. The business network, as Arne mentioned, that has the mission to connect each and every company, each and every business professional in Germany and Europe in IoT with someone who can help them, basically. So we started to go operational in November. We are very well networked into different scenes. Personally, I have done a few blockchain things myself in the past as well, but just as a side note, we have ecosystem partners, we have IoT professional companies, software companies, innovation companies, access to entrepreneurship. As you've seen, one of our members, IoT1, we have access to training, and we're trying to find the right partners. We're trying to identify the people who we can help to get to the next level in terms of business success. I would love to win-wins today with the insights that we get from our top level speakers and guests here today. But also, as Arne rightfully said, if you have questions, if you would like to reach out, if you think about becoming a member potentially of IoT+, please reach out, let us know. Come talk to us, come find out what all the fuss and all the news is about. And if you have new ideas, if you have questions around the topics today, please feel free to reach out to anyone and everyone involved in our event. Again, this is a thing that lives from interaction. So write your questions into the chat, and we'll try to get around to them in due time. I'm also a heavy question asker. People who have followed our events in the past know that I'm very prone to listen to people and ask them follow-ups. So if I talk too much, Arne, please stop me. It's two topics that are very close to my heart that I'm trying to get to work together as well. And I could talk for a long time about the marriage of different technologies and how IoT provides data for DLT, but I mean, we'll probably get there anyhow today. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Falco. Awesome, also introductory speech. And let me, without further ado, introduce you to Tanya Suarez, IoT Tribe, as well as BlueStack's CEO. Please, Tanya, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much. And if I could just start by thanking you, Arne, for putting me in contact with this wonderful group of people, but also saying, Falco, you've just said exactly what I say. I have a tendency also to talk a lot. I like to listen a lot as well. So I will try to minimize my talking so I can listen to everyone else, and always really happy also to answer questions and have a bit more of a discussion with the people in the audience. So I do have a presentation. So I'm sure that many of you already have Zoom fatigue and presentation fatigue. So please just use this as a coat rack, something which I've hung some ideas, and they're just going to be the starting point, I think, for further discussions. So the first thing is that really the Internet of Things has been around as a buzzword for quite a long time now. It's been, when we first started working with the IoT, nobody even knew what it was. Well, not nobody, but it was definitely within the domain of techies. If you went into a business and you said, look, you know, there's a new paradigm shift way back then, in which you're going to find connections between devices, and those devices are going to be able to make decisions autonomously. You know, people were looking at us thinking, well, you know, how is that relevant to what I'm doing, and how is that going to be relevant to my business? Now, probably 20 years later, we're seeing that actually all of this is no longer a buzzword. Most people know what the IoT is. And I think that the exciting thing is that the IoT has given rise to, again, a new market, a new world in which there are infinite possibilities for developing new products and services that are relevant to consumers and to society all over the world. But the IoT is, of course, made up of infrastructure and sensors, but it's also about how the data that comes out of those sensors can be perhaps connected with other technologies, such as DLTs. But you know, eventually quantum computing will enable a whole load of other applications to come through. And I think that the question that many business leaders ask is, why is that relevant to me now, and what can I do with all of this information that I'm accessing almost on a daily basis? At what point can I decide where to put my my budget? In what period am I going to, or can I expect to see a return on the investments I'm making? And more broadly, I think as citizens, we also want to understand if a city, for example, is collecting our data, well, you know, what is it that that city is doing with that data, and how can that benefit us as citizens? Because I'm going to be talking about this in just a second, so just hold on to that idea. So first of all, there are some elements in terms of the context that mean that we're able to do a lot more than we were even a couple of years ago. Ubiquitous connectivity, this is a figure that is important in itself. 31 billion devices, that's a lot of zeros, but there are even more in the number of data being collected everywhere. But why is this connectivity important? Because actually it raises a lot of questions and possibilities around new products and services that can be developed and integrated into previously non-digital businesses. And the data that those devices collect, as I say, can become really valuable if it is stored and used correctly. The second is betting on the blockchain. Now here we've wanted to use the alliteration, but blockchain isn't the same necessarily as a DLT. It's the old adage of a banana is within the category of fruit, but not all pieces of fruit are bananas. And this is the same thing. There's been a significant increase, or there will be a significant increase in the use of DLTs generally in blockchain solutions in the next 3 years. And the interesting thing is that a lot of the work that is being done at the moment is really going to be coming into fruition, and the results of that work are going to be seen again, you know, in the next few years through fora such as this. And it's really important that people are understanding what's happening and what can be applicable to their particular context and situation and market. And previously I was, you know, referring to the number of zeros in the 31 billion. Well, you know, as you can see here, data is absolutely everywhere. 463 exabytes of data, 93 times more than all the words ever spoken by humans. And the question is, okay, what do we do with that data? Where do we store it? What bits of that data need to be protected, whether it's through encryption or other mechanisms? And which bits of data can we comfortably just leave? Do we really have to keep absolutely every single bit of data that comes our way? Or should we perhaps be a little bit more selective and use aggregation methodologies and tools and mechanisms, and to really extract that value as early as possible? Again, why is all of this important? Because while a lot of data at the moment is being collected and analyzed in the cloud, so it's being collected in local devices and then sent to the cloud for storage, the predictions are that in the future, given the amount of growth in the data, we're going to see a significant shift in that, and the data will be collected on the edge, processed on the edge, and then only the data that we really want to be kept will be sent up into the cloud. So alongside all of these things are just a couple of warning points, perhaps. First of all, it takes an average of 5 minutes for a newly deployed IoT device to be attacked, which is actually quite frightening. So it's really important that in any deployment, cybersecurity is front and center of everything to do with even the education of the users, training users, enabling users to really understand that they can be the weakest part in the chain, but also the connections between the devices so that any one device doesn't necessarily compromise a whole system simply because something hasn't happened. And again, it's really interesting to see so many different solutions coming onto the market that are ready to be implemented in the here and now that are addressing this. Secondly, and it's a broader question, and it's around the untrustworthiness, again, linked to, of course, all of these cyber attacks that have been really taking the news headlines. I'm sure, well, I don't know, but you may have heard that the health system in Ireland has just been compromised. It's been down for more than 5 days now because of a cyber attack. They refuse to pay the ransomware, and we have to see the cost and the implications of that. All of these figures, I think, really contribute to a general sense of citizens, for citizens, but also for business people, for being really wary about data, where it's stored, what people do with that data, and how that data can really become a point of vulnerability for the organization, or as we've just seen in the case of Ireland, a critical national infrastructure that is the health system, particularly today. So I wanted to come back, I suppose, to what we see as digital transformation and how we approach digital distributed ledger technologies and the IoT. And I think that digital transformation more than ever is not about a single technology. It's not about companies deciding that they're going to invest in the cloud or invest in much as in previous eras, they would have decided to invest in a particular piece of machinery. It's about understanding how the blend and mix of the technologies can really be pulled together to deliver on a business objective. And it's about, of course, infrastructure, but it's also about intangible capabilities. It's about making sure that people within organizations understand what those capabilities can bring to the organization and the things maybe that they also need to adjust to, whether in working practices or in approaches or in even addressing the needs, the current and future needs of their customers. So let's look at some of the ways in which new value can be unlocked through DLTs. I mean, clearly data becomes immutable. This is really important, for example, for smart contracts. You don't want a contract that is constantly changing, and you don't have the ability to refer back to something that has been categorically signed and accepted by all the parties. They provide transparency, resilience for an organization, security. They are by very nature consensual. That is absolutely the core of all DLTs. And as we've just seen from Arne's initial presentation, they can now provide scalability. This wasn't the case a few years ago, and it's really interesting to see that when these technologies hit the market, the problems that arise with adoption and eventually scaling become the point of interest and the focus of attention of people like Falco and Holger and Marcus, who, as super intelligent people, far more intelligent than I am, are able to find ways around these problems and bring solutions to the table. So, but I have to say that, as it says here, all that glitters is not gold. Some of the DLTs can still provide or still raise questions despite the idea of scalability. Some of them can require significant computing power. there can be issues around congestion in the ecosystem. And Tangle doesn't charge fees for the deployment of Tangle itself, but there can be a cost attached to that really needs to be weighed against perhaps the use and the integration of other technologies for a particular purpose. And I think the most important one that we've seen recently is, you really, and coming back to the energy point, is the contribution to climate change, right? So if you're using some type of distributed ledger technology, but to be honest, like, you can apply this to any type of data set that requires a lot of storage and transmission, you also need to understand the energy requirements that all of that is requiring, and the impact, of course, on the environment of this. As you can see here, this is a Bloomberg graph, but it very specifically singles out Bitcoin, but the amount of energy that Bitcoin generates or consumes is actually higher than that of Greece or Chile or the Czech Republic, and that is definitely food for thought.
Tanya, we're short in time. Could you close anytime soon?
Yeah, so I'm just going to go very quickly through some applications that are real-world applications of DLTs. They can be applied in industry, for example. The IOTA has one. The IOTA has an industry marketplace that's based on DLTs. You have a Hyperledger one that's around tracking assets and very specifically around tracking COVID vaccines. And within health, you have a whole range of different applications that are about collecting the data in a secure way, but for example, also using them for clinical trials. So I will just, I think, finish there. It's been a real pleasure to be here today, and around obviously for questions and for hearing my esteemed colleagues. Thank you.
Excellent, very interesting, Tanya. Your input. I'm pretty sure we can take that on in the discussion later, question and answers. Holger, now the stage is up to you. Would you like to present, please?
Thank you very much, Arne, and thank you everyone for taking the time. Let me quickly share my screen here. All right, so let me just move this over here. All right, so thank you very much, and thank you very much for the great presentation, Tanya. So what we are seeing is that essentially we have a very high magnitude of devices which are going to be not only connected, but some of them might also work locally. And when we think about IOTA, our vision is to really create an open source, secure, and feeless protocol, which is completely decentralized, so it doesn't rely on any single point, which can provide a point of failure, and develop this open source. As a non-for-profit foundation, the IOTA Foundation is registered in Germany. We decided due to legal reasons to go to Germany because Germany is a lot more stricter regarding foundations, and with the aim to have a lot more credibility, of course, because there's a lot more regulation in place. We are working with various esteemed partners. As you can see here, ST Microelectronics, one of the world's largest semiconductors, has integrated IOTA into their firmware of several IoT development boards. Let me just move this one over here as well. Jaguar Land Rover is addressing a topic of data collection. So how can we collect data, for example, with your own car, and how can you sell it? How can you get incentivized with it? And there are a couple of more very fascinating and esteemed collaborations and cooperations where we're going to share more also in the future. We have one of the largest ecosystems. This is quite nice because it's something which you cannot really buy. You can buy it for a very short time, but essentially you have to earn it. And the IOTA community is just incredibly awesome community. I started myself in the community, and it's quite exciting to be here. We have a lot of patents already referencing to IOTA and a lot of third-party academic research papers. We also won an award recently for our consensus algorithm, which is quite nice. It's going to come out very soon and will provide like a completely new scalability. So, and I talked a little bit about the foundation. So what is it all about and what does this mean with decentralized and so on? Essentially, IOTA is coming with a background from the IoT. And if you see this picture here, you probably have a device or two here with Alexa or a smart vacuum cleaner or a camera. So in general, all these devices, they're getting more intelligent due to deep learning, artificial intelligence. At the same time, the hardware is getting smaller. And so these devices are going to interact a lot more directly with us humans. And a lot more intelligently. And at one point, they will probably also interact directly with each other. But they still need to interact due to market economic principles. This means like a car actually needs to be on the road. And Elon Musk at one point said that Tesla might stop producing cars because the autopilot is so far developed that they will just pivot towards a mobility as a service model where the car is driving around by itself and is picking up people and you can just order it through an app. So these devices are becoming like always online, self-sustainable. They can make decisions, they can start to interact. And the question is now, how does this affect security? And as Tanya pointed out, there's a lot happening. Well, first, they get attacked automatically, but secondly, a lot of security is built in silos. And with IOTA, we are aiming to really decentralize the security aspect so that we have like a global data backbone, which is secure, through which data can be shared, can be accessed, can be sold with microtransactions. And at the same time, you do not really have any fees for the protocol itself. So when you see, or when you take a look at blockchain, just going to, for the sake of time, because Tanya has shown like a very similar slide about the growth of the IoT. We are facing like a certain problem. So the existing infrastructure is not really ready for this huge amount of devices. We have a lot of centralized systems. We are saving our data into the cloud, but this data is owned by for-profit companies. And there's not really like an open source technology at the moment for machine-to-machine interoperability, data sharing, and so on. And this is where we see IOTA. So to really have an open source software which is empowering people, where you can, so everybody can use it. You don't need to buy a license. You don't need to watch a 30-second advertisement clip. You can download it, you can use it, you can participate essentially directly in the network. It provides the highest security. You can utilize it for data transactions between devices. And because it's a public protocol, it's always available. You can use it for monetization. And the good thing is that your device doesn't expose itself. So your device doesn't expose its IP address, for example, through which it could get attacked again. But it communicates anonymously through this global data backbone. And when you have another device which is like listening to this data stream from your device, then it can pick it up, it can interpret the commands and so on, and you have like a complete communication, which is absolutely highly scalable for billions of devices. And with IOTA, we are doing a couple of things different than traditional blockchain technology, because blockchain, you have typically the blocks which are interlinked with a chain. So you have a very serial approach. And with IOTA, we are saying this doesn't make any sense. So very early, our founders discovered that there are certain scalability limits. With IOTA, we are going a different approach. So we have been pioneering the concept, what is called the DAG, the DAG. It's a directed acyclic graph for the mathematicians among us here. And essentially the idea is that one transaction is confirming two or more previous transactions. So what you can see here on the picture, these would be, or these are individual transactions. And this is the tangle, because it's like interwoven. And when you look at it, essentially it can become thicker when there's like a higher throughput. It can become thinner when there's a lower throughput. But essentially the novelty to blockchain is that you don't have a serialization, but that you handle the consensus in parallel, which gives you a lot faster response time. It gives you a lot higher scalability also for future models. And we don't have this huge energy waste like you see with all these or many other technologies. So if you think of it, for one Bitcoin transactions, at the same time, you could do 600 million IOTA transactions for the same amount of energy. So we are building it as a highly scalable secure data network, which you can utilize for various use cases like digital identity. You can use it for digital twins, because everyone in this in the business chain has direct access to the data, or you can give this access and provide this data. And the big novelty is that we built it in a way where in traditional blockchain technology or architecture, you always do a transaction, then you have to pay a transaction fee. Essentially, all your transactions are competing with other transactions for this space in the block, because the block size is limited in the blockchain. With IOTA, we don't have this. So we can handle these transactions in parallel, and essentially can do a data transaction by saying, I'm going to send my temperature of a sensor to the IOTA tangle, and you don't have to pay for it, because what we did was that with IOTA, we combined the role of this miner, what you typically have in a blockchain. This is the guy who is getting paid with your fees in order to validate transactions. So we combined this with the role of the user. So it's a bit of an altruistic approach as well. The more you utilize the network, automatically, the more you also contribute to the network yourself. You keep it stable, you keep it secure. And at the same time, you can also send a value. So you could send a microtransaction, because we don't have to pay the miner again. So you can send 0.001 cent, and the other party would exactly get these 0.01 cent. And this is essentially turning the whole traditional blockchain paradigm upside down, because in a typical blockchain, you have a scenario where you say, I'm doing a financial transaction where I'm paying a fee, and then I attach a payload. And with IOTA, we're saying, wait, this doesn't make really any sense. First, we need a highly scalable data communication network. And then the payment should be an optional part of this network in order to also facilitate data exchanges. And so we are building IOTA with different developer toolings. We're building it open source with different products, with certification, audit trails. The industry marketplace has been mentioned. We are restructuring it a bit at the second. Just taking a look at the time, so I'm coming to the end. It's very flexible regarding different use cases. You can see it here: automotive, mobility, digital twins, vehicle, car vehicle passport. Digital identity is a big one, also for vaccination passports, for example. And we are building it together with and for the industry, with large partners. We are going to standardize the protocol as well, together with Object Management Group. We're also working on Tangle EE, which is Tangle Enterprise Edition, which dried out a little bit due to COVID and the shift of priorities of companies during COVID, but we are going to pick it up again quite soon. Yeah, and so we are developing IOTA together with a fantastic community. If you have any questions, if you want to join us, go to iota.org or write me directly, connect to me under LinkedIn. A ton of use cases, and I would be happy to share more and have first discussions how to integrate it into your enterprise technology stack. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you very much as well, Holger. As always, a great presentation from your side. Without further ado, Marcus from Ubirch, COO, please, would you also apply your magic to us?
I will try my very best, and I will always also try my very best to make up for the delay. I really have only a short presentation. As you said, my name is Marcus Breuer, COO and co-founder.
We can't see you.
Yeah, just give me a second.
Okay.
I didn't write anything about that on the table. And as usual, we are still a small startup, and everyone in the company has to jump in when it comes to presentations, even the bean picker like me, and the CEO unfortunately couldn't make it to this presentation, but I will try my very best to substitute for him. I think all of us are trying to get over more or less the same points. You can see it on the initial slide here in my presentation too. It's all about trust, and something which, like the IOTA guys, we're trying to get into the market for a few years now, is that it is data that drives the future or will drive the future economy. It always already drives part of the current economy, but it will grow more. I avoided the term data is the new oil here because it isn't true, and oil is such an ugly substance. I really wouldn't like to have our beautiful data compared to such dirty stuff. But in a way, data really will drive the future economy and will be essential for many business models in that area. And especially if you look to IoT, what does it mean? There is this concept of a digital twin where the physical reality is replicated somewhere in the cloud or in a network. Probably you could call this Internet of Things, a part of the internet. And even though the relevant stuff happens in the physical reality, all the big decisions, the relationships between companies and the money transfer, etc., it's all happening in the digital world, somewhere in the cloud. And if you do this, if you base your decisions on data, on this mirror of the real reality or the physical reality, you have to make absolutely sure that the decisions are being made on the right data, on data which is true. So in essence, what we call it, what we need is trustworthy data. Because if you don't have the right data, if you don't have true data, horrible things will happen. And I admit that this example is a little bit cheesy, but what has happened here a few years ago when these Boeing 737s were falling from the sky actually was the same thing which can happen in every data dependent or data, how you could say, based business. If you have the wrong data, you will make wrong decisions. The wrong data here happened not because some hacker was trying to manipulate things, but because an engineer has built a sensor into the whole system in a wrong way. So it was, sending wrong data to the flight computer. The flight computer made wrong decisions trying to bring the plane down, and it succeeded. Yeah, wrong decisions lead to damages, to incidents of all kinds, and in the end, this will lead to broken business models. But this is just a spectacular example. For example, I think everyone has mentioned in their speech right now the COVID epidemic, more or less ruling the world for a time. We are involved in it too. But again, as soon as you have production chains, or right now these vaccination certificates, etc., if you have this in digital form, someone will try to hack it, someone will try to manipulate it for different reasons, for money, just out of malice or whatever, and this will happen. So this is just one example, or the other one even a little bit more spectacular, about what will happen if you base your decisions on data which is not true, which cannot be trusted or should not be trusted. You can collect many, I think a similar slide I've seen before. So in the end, all data-driven business models need to ensure that data is trustworthy, and what is more important, that it's independent of its journey and transmission. In the beginning, in the first presentation, I think it was by Arne, he already mentioned that in the past, when you try to secure data networks like we have today, you're typically dependent on encryption. Yeah, and of course you can make sure that data is not changed going from A to B if you encrypt it, or that it will be noticed rather quickly. But as soon as these networks become more complicated, for example, if you look at this concept of the digital twin again, you can see that typically data is not just sent from A to B, from end to end, as it's usually called, but it goes through many hops in a larger network, and it will be used by different data consumers. For example, you're not only sending a temperature reading to some control center where it is displayed in a nice graph, but maybe your maintenance company gets this information too, or your insurance company will get it because you have a contract which is actually based on performance on the factory floor, etc., etc. So you usually have, even for those data points which are emitted by very small sensors, you have potentially a lot of consumers, and you don't even know how many users or consumers these data points will have in the future. And one can question, of course, if you base your security or your trustworthiness on connecting A to B with a typical private-public network key structures which are in use today, is this still applicable? For example, if you look at the network, if just one of these nodes in the network is compromised, everything which is topologically behind it, is untrustworthy in essence. And at each node, the data might be decrypted, might be used for different purposes. It has to be encrypted again to send it to the next. And this, of course, offers many attack surfaces for someone trying to hack this for different reasons or to manipulate your systems. And this is why, which was quite unusual at the time we did it, I think more or less 3.5, 4 years ago, we decided not to secure the tunnels, the connections, but the data points in themselves. And to keep it short, this is a solution we actually came up with, which is a little bit different from the approach which IOTA is using, but is actually intended to provide a similar solution when it comes to being very light, very low on demands regarding resources which are available. It's intended to be very quick in performance, because we always envisioned industrial applications. And what we came up with is a very simple, very lightweight protocol, which is actually running on very low power, very low resource edge devices. At least it can, of course, it can run on more resourceful nodes too, and which kind of, we say, seals data points originating from these devices. And then these sealed devices are connected like a blockchain already. You could say we're using a blockchain of block size 1 in our protocol. This is sent to our backend, where these data packets are, you could say, compressed on a very high level by building so-called Merkle trees. So ones of you who are into cryptography might know the term. And in the end, the root hash of such a Merkle tree is actually anchored in a public blockchain. One of them, IOTA, actually. So one Berlin company greeting another Berlin company here. But we are quite agnostic when it comes to the public blockchain. We are using others too. And this public blockchain, or public DLT network, IOTA is not a blockchain, of course we know, will generate or inject the highest level of trust possible into our solutions. Because in the end, you can take each data point which we put a signature around on the local device, and can take this and check it against the entry in the public blockchain if you can really trust this point. What you might be able to see here on this diagram too is that we completely separate the transmission or the processing of the actual payload, which you see here in the top area. This payload is still going to our clients' data centers, so we don't even see them. We only get to know the hashes of these payloads. And what we are processing is only these change data proofs, as it's called here, or you could say the seals, separating this very effectively, which makes it easier for our clients to trust us because we don't see their data, and which makes it easier to accept regulations around data privacy and similar, confidentiality of data, etc., because this is not something which we even get into contact with. Once we have applied our magic to these data streams, like with any data which is stored in blockchain or blockchain-like structures, of course, we guarantee you that the payload will not be changed, that all the data stream, all the packets in this data stream are coming from the same device, which is known on our systems. And of course, that the order of packages coming from these devices cannot be changed without notice to just name the most important ones for our client. And in addition, what we always have focused on, which might be important, for some potential users of this kind of technology, not so for others, is that we really always have strived to make this as light as possible. For example, we have an application out running where the technology is working on a battery-powered device, I don't know, which is half the size of this package, and it actually will run for 2 years without changing or charging the battery. It is implemented on a Cortex M4 core. We can go down as low to a Cortex M0 core, which is very small, very cheap, very easy to integrate or produce, manufacture in large numbers. So we are really focused on this whole IoT stuff. But I know that this is an IoT focused circle. We are not limited in application to the IoT space. Our largest customer right now is the German Health Ministry, because we are providing the technology for the German vaccination pass, which is called cough pass right now. So every time you need, like with all blockchain technology, every time you need to make certain that a certain document or a certain piece of data, and a document or a picture is just a larger piece of data, is really immutable and should be made immutable for the lowest possible cost.
Marcus, sorry, but I'd like to come to an end as well, to give you the chance to come to an end.
This is nice. This coincidence, it's a nice coincidence, because this is the last chart, and I would say open for questions.
Wonderful. So without further ado, because we would like to also keep the timing, we have 12 minutes left. We have a lot of questions here also to ask and to talk about. And let me just maybe go into one of the questions that Mark, he shared the use case here from the audience. Thank you, Mark, for doing that. I guess the question what Mark was raising was, hey, the problem that OEMs have with sharing data. Now, everybody heard of that. OEMs are very stingy with data. Nobody wants to share. There are like tons of startups wanted to bring up their platforms and say, hey, we have this great platform, you can share here your great data. And nobody wanted to do that because the OEMs don't share data. So blockchain would essentially would make that possible. So question to the audience of you guys, how would a blockchain be able to make that possible to, on the one side, secure the data and also only give a little bit access to those who on the one side pay, or don't get, like a competition would not ever get any information. So maybe your short outtakes on that. Tanya, would you like to start?
Yeah, I think that it's quite an interesting issue. So there are lots of precedents for sharing data outside DLTs, and maybe we can learn from some of the experiences previously. So as I was saying originally, there is a tendency or a trend, should we say, in which cities are opening up their data sets. And those data sets relate to all sorts of different aspects of our life as citizens within those cities, but also relating to infrastructure usage, combining their own data with external data sets that are coming from satellite imagery, all sorts of things there. So one of the really good platforms, I think, that have enabled that to happen has been Fireware. And I have to admit to being a Fireware skeptic when it first came out, because I thought there was an awful lot of money being pumped into that, and I do actually quite believe in the free market. But nevertheless, I do think that there are some learning points there. I think that some of the problems in that particular context have already been solved by Tangle and other protocols. For example, interoperability, that's a key issue, right, for sharing data. Data sets need to be similar, have similar structures, and you need to know or have the same semantics to be able to call up different bits. So that's one thing. And just really,
Yeah,
really
so sorry, we have a lot of questions here. Okay. Would we be able to answer that in like a 2-sentence or 3-sentence? Would give also a little bit of space. Holger, what's your outtake on that?
So I think there's a realization that all the companies are still quite scared to share the data. But 2 things. So many companies think they could build like a second Amazon or AWS, and then the realization is starting to set in to say, oh, maybe we cannot do this when they're doing the first steps. And they're thinking of other models, how to use data sharing for incentivization. And by my opinion, yes, we have these large data silos, but they're starting to break up. And I think as soon as we see the first one, the first company really turning it into a business model, then the dam will break and a lot of others will just follow, because combined data is just like a lot more than the sum of its parts.
Thank you. Marcus, you also have a thought on that.
I think it's a misconception that everyone thinks that if you start to use a blockchain, your data will necessarily be public, because our architecture, for example, separates this quite nicely. On the other hand, it's typically the first mover who will change this perception in the market. I was working together with my co-founders in a different market, in the online advertising industry, for a few years before that. We saw it there. Yeah. So in the beginning, nobody wanted to share their data. Now there's a lot of data sharing going on, and everyone is profiting from it. And I expect this to happen in this kind of industry too. There's reluctance, but this will change over the years.
Great. Also, a question from Yannick. IOTA has a marketplace for industry to share. This is also the same idea, right? You could eventually also put a smart contract behind data sharing. If you want to use my data, you need to pay. Here's no smart contract. Holger, what is the plan of the foundation here?
Yeah, this is going to be, it's going to get integrated as well. So we have a technology called IOTA Streams, where essentially you can use virtual data channels. And one of the next upgrades for Streams will be that you can receive microtransactions for data directly, and then you get access to this data. And we are discussing with companies how we can work this best into new business models and integrate it into their enterprise technology stacks. So as soon as we have the technology and when it's easy to use, yeah, then we have the potential that companies will just start doing it.
Wonderful. Also, a question just lately coming in, same area. Is data being immutable in blockchain concerning especially medical data? Tanya, can you use a blockchain without putting it on the blockchain and still hashing it?
Oh, I think that's technical questions that my colleagues are better answering. But I think that I think Michaela is raising the question of whether there's a mistake. Say, for example, you had one diagnostic and then it was considered to be not correct, but you'd probably have that record now anyway. I mean, you'd have that historic view. So, but maybe one of my more technical colleagues can speak to that.
The way you would do it naturally is you would write that data, the medical data, Michaela, on a normal database, but you would secure the entry over a hash. So it's anonymous data, but you could still secure that over, let's say, over another database that you can bring in. Yannick also asked a lot of questions, and Holger, you already were answering them in the chat for Tangle EE and Bosch and so on. Maybe another word on that, or Holger?
There are quite many questions. So regarding Tangle EE, it's something we are discussing internally, how we can best set it up, because COVID has essentially hit when we started the whole initiative, and then all the innovation budgets went back to core competencies. So if you're working in a larger company, it's maybe something what the community doesn't really know. But with COVID, of course, all the revenues started to crumble, and this also had an effect of like various innovation groups where we were also a part in, what our partners told us, system integrators told us, consultancies told us. So now the budget is slowly coming back, and we have to see how we can circle companies more around Tangle EE again to provide a better, how to say, provide better use cases and better, like, say, participants among the value and the business chain for them to really get more value out of it for the limited resources they have.
Okay, thank you. Marcus, there was also another guy, myself also asking, I didn't really understood the concept. So do you consider the Ubirch solution that you have, is that another blockchain because you compared it to IOTA? Is that even comparable or no?
No.
I misunderstood.
It is,
okay.
As we typically say, we're building our solution on top of public blockchains. Part of what we're doing, part of the structure of the protocol is like a blockchain, but we're not competing with blockchains. We don't have our internal consensus. Yeah, so it's typically not a competition for any kind of blockchain.
Okay, and is it permissionless or is it permissioned? Also, a user was asking this question.
Basically, in theory, it is permissioned, but as these permissions can be acquired quite freely, you could say it is permissionless, but of course you have to get a token to access our API.
Okay, another question maybe also for IOTA, what's the validity proof mechanism behind DLT? How can you be sure of validity if there's no independent instance like a miner? A classic question, Holger.
That's because we're using a new metric, a new consensus mechanism, which doesn't rely on the miner itself. It's called, it takes mana, or a metric called mana, into account, but going into this in one sentence would be too much. I will paste a link into the chat to read up on it, but it's a completely novel consensus. It's the one where we also received an award, which we published today on Twitter, and it's quite interesting. It's highly scalable, and so we are very excited to bring this into the upcoming incentivized test network.
Awesome. We only got a couple of minutes left, and it's so interesting because I met Marcus essentially on Facebook just 2 days ago, where we had like a little bit of a discussion. Marcus is a very intelligent and eloquent writer there, and I was following his writings quite eagerly, and we had a discussion of blockchains being so energy hungry. And a question to Holger also, because IOTA calls themselves a green or comparatively green DLT. Can you also elaborate what makes you greener than traditional blockchains, and why is that?
It's because we don't have miners. This is one thing, and because a miner typically calculates, when you take Bitcoin or Ethereum, it's quite resource intensive because everyone is calculating the same puzzle, but there's only one winner. And 99.999% they go out empty while they're still spending their computing power. And with IOTA, we have a very targeted way to confirm previous transactions. So, and this is why the energy is being used very scarcely. And this is why IOTA is, I don't know if it's the greenest. I would probably say yes, but it's at least like one of the very most greenest distributed ledger technologies on the planet.
Thank you very much. Awesome. Last but not least, we're coming into and Tanya, a question for you also, because this is let's say something that is affected by the societies. In future, we might not need any more trust by humans because we are essentially bringing trust to humanity by blockchain. So blockchain would be enough. Would that mean that humans will be rendered meaningless? Or let's say, in which extent will humans have more freedom? How will society evolve?
I think this, trust is the basic currency across all of our societies. So I don't think that the need for trust will ever be eliminated completely. I think what can happen is that there'll be less friction in how you acquire that trust. So it'll be easier to establish, I suppose, credentials that will make people trust you. But ultimately, DLTs will be a mechanism for establishing trust at whatever level. I think that there are all sorts of instances in which we can see that today.
Wonderful. So it's just like 3 o'clock right now, and I'm very German. I like to be precise. So from my side, I would like to close it. Thank you very, very much for all your amazing input today in speeches. Like, so it was really a great thing, and I can't wait to have a second round of that with DLT here together with IoT+.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
Okay, goodbye. Adios.
Thank you very much for the invite. Everyone have a good time.
Goodbye.